killing of George Floyd brought all of the ugliness to bear. Obviously, we've had murders of black people at the hands of police and did not. But that straw where he sat on this guy's neck, took his life, broke the camel, the straw that broke the camel back. And so here we are, and the ugliness is now being exposed for all to see. Anyhow, I hope we get to a place where we can get back to some normalcy and we can live life. Let's welcome our guest, Mr. Martin George, attorney at law. Good morning, sir. And he is the chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber. Good morning, sir.
Yes, hi, good morning to you and good morning to all your viewers and good morning to Tobago and good morning Trinidad.
Very good. All right, but they told me you were coming in set.
Order.
Yes, they said you were going to be on set, so I'm looking forward to that and thing. But anyway, we'll do the same. All right.
See, the thing is, I couldn't follow in the lofty footsteps of one of your guests from last week. I was a very high-profile guest.
All right, okay. Well, let's start there with the very high-profile guest. The Prime Minister spoke on self-governance, and you made a post, and you spoke that we should ensure that we have economic, financial independence. Let's talk about the self-governance matter that obviously that was promised to us by the Prime Minister in his campaign leading up to him becoming Prime Minister. However, it's still languishing in the Parliament. Give us your take on what we should be focusing on instead. But based on what you're saying, we should aim to achieve economic and financial independence.
Yes, well, the thing is, you see, I've always said it, and I mean, you and I, we've discussed it many times when we've had the program. The main idea I think that Tobago needs to look at is really to be able to cut that financial navel string from central government. In other words, for now, you need it in the sense that you don't have your own financial independence. You are not generating or earning enough, money to be able to be self-sustaining. But that's where we should be aiming to go. Because as I've used a very simple example in the past, Brother B. When you're growing up and you're living under your parents' roof, they are the ones providing for you. So therefore, you stay there. You can't say, well, I'm asserting my independence. I'm going out to live on my own, because you depend on them for food, clothes, shelter, everything. But as you grow up and you become a young man, you start working, you start earning money. You start putting aside, you start saving, and then it reaches a point where you can then decide, because you have enough of your own financial independence, you can then decide, well, hey, look, Mommy, Daddy, I am leaving home. I am going to rent a little apartment. I'm going to, start out on my own. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, you don't need permission. And that's where I want Tobagonians to move our minds to. In other words, this idea of you constantly having to, say, well, you're drafting a bill and you're going down to the Parliament to beg for permission for Tobago to be independent or autonomous or whatever word or terminology or phraseology you want to use. Mm-hmm. That's the wrong idea. In other words, we are taking a very backward and archaic and anachronistic look at the scenario. Because if it is that you achieve financial and economic independence, then you don't need to ask anybody permission to leave. You don't need to ask anybody permission for your own autonomy or your own independence. Even if you remain in your parents' house, so in other words, you remain part of the union of TNT, but you could say, well, look, I'm going to build up in the back of the house and have my own little space. I'm going to make a little one-bedroom apartment. You have your own finances and your own wherewithal, and you are doing that. So you're not asking permission in the sense to say, well, look, can I be independent? And I think that's where we need to move, because even if, and this is what I want Tobagonians to think of, even if you get the most generous legislative package passed in Parliament, you manage by some miracle to get both sides of the House to agree, in other words, government and opposition, and they pass some legislation granting Tobago full autonomy. At the end of the day, if you still have to keep coming to Port of Spain every year for your budgetary allocation of $3 billion, then you are not really independent, because at the end of the day, once I can control your financial purse strings, I control you. So in other words, it's like a dog on a leash. You know, all you're doing is lengthening the leash.
Okay.
That's all this constitutional amendment is. In other words, Tobagonians fighting to get a longer leash. And I am saying what we need to do is to cut the leash. And then once we are financially free, then we are masters of our own destiny.
All right, let me ask you now. How do we could debate whether or not, you know, there are some people going to argue your stance on that. However, let's go to the point that you're making, that we need to be financially independent. How do we achieve financial independence? What do we need to do, or what do we need to put in place to achieve this independence, financial independence?
Okay, all right. So therefore, we need to start with Tobago developing its own entrepreneurial class, its own class of young business persons who will be able to step forward and start developing their own products, their own ideas, their own businesses. We need to have the Tobago House of Assembly as an incubator and facilitator for such business. We don't want the Tobago House of Assembly trying to insert itself into businesses, such as going and take on vainglorious projects, such as buying failing hotels and saying that they are going to run it and turn it around.
All right.
You are not a hotelier. You are not in the business of running hotels. If the persons who are experts in that area, who've been doing it for years, have failed and they are underwater and they are drowning in debt, then who are you in the THA to think that you are capable of managing that? No, what you should be doing is ensuring the enabling environment. Make sure legislatively, make sure from the point of view of, in terms of people wanting to register their businesses, they wanting to get government approvals, they want to get regulatory approvals, that you facilitate that. So in other words, you create a business climate that is very facilitative to your own people to say, well, look, Tobagonians, I want to encourage business. I want to encourage you all to develop things, develop your own products, your own services, because too often we see the scenario, Brother B, where Tobagonians sit back and they complain and they see Trinidadians or foreigners come in, develop businesses, and then they grumble and say, but you know, these people are coming from outside and they're taking everything. But the point is the opportunities are there and Tobagonians are sitting back doing nothing about it. And I mean, it's not just to blame the people. I also blame the assembly, because I say the assembly needs to encourage and facilitate that entrepreneurial spirit to ensure that Tobagonians are able to stand on their own feet. Once you have that, then you develop a critical mass whereby once the tide raises, all the boats will end up rising with the tide.
Okay, let's stay there with number one. When we talk development or financial independence, we talk mass or people or numbers in population. Our population size, Mr. George, you would know, you have traveled around the world, and in one city, they have more people than Tobago. We don't have people, and I want to bring this in the mix. If we are to talk independence, it means therefore our invite or invitation to foreign investment into Tobago needs to be part of how we develop, because the Tobagonians by themselves cannot adequately or maybe do not have the support to invest in, let's say, a theme park or whatever, so as to bring in people, as to, because our numbers are few. You said it, we're too few.
And you see,
take it from there.
Then again, you're talking about the facilitative and enabling environment.
Yes.
The Foreign Investment Act has been one of the greatest crippling factors to Tobago development and investment from overseas, because by that they have stifled all foreign investment. We have called repeatedly, and what would I think help to develop Tobago tremendously is if the Prime Minister would give us a gift by the immediate and unconditional repeal of the Foreign Investment Act. Now, the thing is, when I say that, it's not to say that you are going to allow foreigners just to come in and swoop in and take over. No, you then replace it with something that has certain guidelines, as you see in other Caribbean islands. For instance, you will say, okay, for any development project, you must have a 10% partnership with a local person. So in other words, there must be a Tobagonian involved as a 10% shareholder in your enterprise. And when I say 10% shareholder, it does not necessarily mean that the Tobagonian has to always come up with 10% capital. It may be that you are providing the expertise, the workforce, the local guidance, that kind of thing. So in other words, your contribution for your 10% can take different forms. And of course, it can also include some finances. But what I'm saying is that you ensure that people who come in with projects for development from overseas, once they are investing, they must have a local partner. That way, you develop the Tobago entrepreneurial and business class. They get to learn, they develop, their knowledge base will be expanded. They get to understand, well, okay, yes, this is how you develop the business. This is what you do. And then now you leverage the strengths of the foreign investment partner who will be able to say, well, okay, look, I have contacts with an overseas travel agency who will be able to bring visitors here, who will be able to bring persons here, or they may be able to say, well, look, I have architects or builders who could come in and, give some guidance. And even in that, you have them partnering with your local contractors to ensure that there's that knowledge transfer. Okay. The thing is, let me tell you, these are not radical ideas. It's not rocket science. These are simple, common sense ideas that other islands have used quite successfully, and we can just pattern it. We don't need to reinvent the wheel.
We have a blockage in the way. It's called the Land License Act that prevents foreigners and this long drawn-out process that you have to go through for any investor to occupy Tobago in any way, as to have that which you spoke about to be the 10% of the local and so on. The Land License Act, how fast do we need to repeal or to have it accommodating for investors?
Well, this is what I'm saying. That needs to be totally repealed. There can't be any, scaling back. It has to be totally repealed. But as I say, you put your guardrails and your safeguards in place by ensuring that you have legislation to say any foreign investor must have a local partner. In other words, you are not going to just come in, rape the land and take the profits and go your way. No. There must be a local person involved in your business as a partner in your business, and therefore you develop it. So therefore the local person now is not only a shareholder, but he also reaps in the profits. He learns the business. He is able to bring his children and his siblings or whoever into the business so that they also gain the knowledge and learn and understand, and they are now able to develop on their own. That's how you build a nation. That's how you do it. So that's what I'm saying. What we really should be focusing on. So therefore, when the THA gets its allocation every year, that $3 billion should be looking to focus on developing our infrastructure, making sure that our road network, our electrical supply network, we should not be suffering from, frequent blackouts, that kind of thing. Our water supply. There's so many Tobagonians who are struggling with just these basic necessities. If that is your daily struggle, then how could you ever be thinking of any lofty ideas to say, well, look, I'm going to build a multi-million-dollar business, because you are so consumed with the day-to-day struggles of life. So that's where the THA has to come in and ensure that we in Tobago have all these basic needs taken care of. And then when I say that, you also need to put in place the business infrastructure. So if people want to register a company, if they need to transfer shares, they need to appoint their directors, all these things need to be able to be done in a quick, efficient manner in Tobago without having to fly down to Trinidad, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And once you set those parameters in place, you will then have the nurturing ground. It's like the Bible says, if you throw your seed on stony ground, it will not flourish. But but if you throw it on fertile ground, and that's what the THA is supposed to be doing for us, creating fertile ground.
Yes.
And I tell you, once the THA creates fertile ground, you will be amazed to see how every Tobagonian will flourish.
Okay, Mr. George, leave it there. We go for a break. When we come back, we want to get into the Road to Recovery Committee and your take on what can be done or what should be done. He, of course, he's saying they're lacking of ideas, and we get his views on that as well. Let's go for a break. When we come back, we have lots more. See you then.
When you need electronics, find what you want quickly at TED Electronics. We have tons of brand name items in smartphones, tablets, LCD and smart TVs, headphones, and speakers. For the best in electronics, check TED. Amazing service and the lowest prices guaranteed. Located upstairs Moosehead Plaza, Bethany Road, Tobago. TED Electronics, your ideal choice for electronics.
In these unsure financial times, protection of your hard-earned financial assets is a priority. We at MI4 Security Cash and Transit Service are sure to grant you peace of mind. Fully insured services. Call us today at 660-7723 or 635-2144. MI4 Security Services Company Limited, keeping Tobago safe.
Visit the new and improved Belfonds Hardware Limited, number 17 Canby, Mount Pleasant. Spacious showroom for your convenience. All hardware items including blocks, steel, paint, toilet sets, power tools, lumber, and everything plumbing and electrical. Open Sunday to Friday. 631-0911.
Welcome back. And of course, our guest, Mr. Martin George, attorney at law, and of course, chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber. Yes, you're there. All right, let's go into the Roadmap to Recovery Committee. First of all, I thought you should have been, or you would have been a member on the committee, Mr. George. Were you available? You did indicate that you're interested in being part of Ansil's leadership as THA leader.
You know, sometimes in Trinidad and Tobago, the fastest way to not get something done is to form a committee. I say no more.
All right. Well, let's go into it's there, and of course, you were, you were not very kind to some of the ideas that you're hearing. You're saying that they are old ideas. Let's talk about the old ideas that has not materialized.
Correct the record. It's not that I'm not being kind. The thing is, we are at the stage of our development where we need to be able to call a spade a spade. If you understand me, okay? And that was an extremely high-powered team of very well-respected persons, lots of very well-respected business persons. However, what it appeared is that they focused, I think, more on the macroeconomic picture without there being sufficient input from the Tobago microeconomic, scenario. So that's where I found, and I said that when one looks at the report as a whole, I found it underwhelming. In other words, it did not inspire, it did not appear to come up with any new ideas. In fact, there seemed to be a rehash of ideas which were already on the table. So when they spoke of the 50 million grant for the tourism accommodation sector, that's something the government had already put out. So, it's a bit disingenuous for the Roadmap to Recovery Committee to, include that as part of their solution when that was something that was already on the table. So, it's in that regard that I found it, the slightest bit disappointing in terms of their suggestions.
All right.
When you look at what they recommended for agriculture, there was nothing new, nothing innovative. They spoke about trying to develop aquaculture. These are ideas that we have so many reports, we have so many studies, we have gathering dust on shelves. So the thing is that there was nothing new, innovative, or dynamic in terms of their recommendations. It seemed to be just as regards the agricultural suggestions, a cut and paste of so many plans that we have sitting on government shelves in the THE.
All right, we're going to go to the National Recovery Team in a minute, but let's stay with Tobago for the time being. All right, there, as you said, ideas with dust, and you referred to, let's talk the entertainment industry, and you mentioned the Tobago Jazz Festival needs to return to the first 3 glory days. I did not have a clue. I was not here, so I missed those days. Let's talk about what you mean by that. What do you mean by bringing it back to what it used to be then? That is a seller and it's an earner.
All right, so in the first 3 years, I had the pleasure of being there on each occasion. And this is when it was run by private enterprise. It was not run by the THE. And you see, this again brings back the point that I keep making. While it is nice in terms of an idea that the THE wants to run things, the point is, if you are not a specialist in the area, the THA is not a specialist in running entertainment ideas or anything of the sort. So therefore, let the persons who are specialized in that do it, and you provide the enabling environment, you partner with them, ensure that you also get a share of the profits, and that's how you develop business. So in those first 3 years, when it was run by CL Financial, right, they ensured that each of the 3 nights were top draw, high quality acts. And I'm telling you, I saw persons like Elton John. You saw persons like Shakira. You saw, so many international acts. You had Sting. You had P. Diddy. You had, I tell you, everybody who was anybody performed in those jazz festivals right here in Trinidad and Tobago. And in that circumstance, I am saying that it was an international jazz festival. In fact, Brother B, just to bring it home to you, our friends from Switzerland would fly in every year for that festival because it was such a big event. It was the biggest, getting together in Tobago for the year. Sometimes you felt as if the island of Tobago was sinking a couple inches into the ocean, the number of people who were there. I remember in those first 3 years, my friends in Trinidad would call me and ask me, well, what is going on? Because they said, the roads in Trinidad are so clear, there's no traffic. And I would tell them, boy, everybody in Tobago for jazz. Everybody's here. That is why Trinidad is empty.
All right. Yeah. So you're saying
that big a deal. And you had people coming in from the Caribbean, from North America, from Europe for this festival. So the thing is, we need to have a real look at how we do it, because right now we are really spinning top in mud, with the greatest of respect, with the way that jazz festival has descended into the abyss.
All right. You said, and so we need to return, put it back into the hands of the private citizen and the THA be the supporter. Let's go to another idea that is taking dust, according to you. The idea of a marina, and we know what that can mean and what it brings. But however, COVID-19 would have maybe made it have some even more dust than it has already. Let's talk about those ideas that were birthed, however, they are there languishing. What do we need to do?
Okay, all right. So then now, when you think of a marina, it's not just the idea of building a marina. Where you make the money as an island would be in your support services. And that's where I see the plans appear to be lacking. In other words, there's talk about building the marina at the cove, but I'm not seeing that we are putting the infrastructure or the wherewithal in place for the support services. What you really need would be your ship chandlers, right? Those who would do the provisioning and supplies for the ships. You would also need to have the yacht repair services, the yacht cleaning services, the provision of staff for the yachts. This is where you make money as an island, right? You would need to have restaurants, you need to have bars, you need to have all those things, because that's what yachties come for. When they come, they want to have a good time right there where they pull up. So in other words, they want to have dinner, they come off, you must have nice restaurants there. so that they can come, they have dinner, they bring their friends, they come from all over the world. We need to understand what the yachting community is. Let me tell you, it's a fraternity of people who they love to have new experiences, they love to explore different places, but you must have that supporting infrastructure. So it's not just to build the boat slips and the places where the boats can dock. You need to make sure that you have the services for the supply of the diesel, the electrical charging stations for the boat. So there's a whole lot that you need to look at, because when you are developing a marina, it's not just a docking facility, it's a community that you are developing. And that's what I'm not seeing in the plans that that are currently, on paper in terms of our marina development.
Okay.
So I fully support the idea of the marina, and I want us to go full steam ahead with it. But what I'm saying is, let's ensure that we also have a holistic plan which includes the support services, because that's where the average Tobagonian will be able to get money, will be able to make money, will be able to set up their own business. So therefore, somebody can set up a tea shop, because the thing is, some people, if you're from England or certain parts of Europe, you want to have a cup of tea in the afternoon,
Yes.
so you have your tea and crumpets,
yes.
that sort of thing. Somebody may set up an ale house, because the Irish persons, they love to have, the ale. So the thing is, once you put all these things in place, I'm telling you, you can develop such a fantastic spin-off of businesses all from the marina, that you'll have persons who, instead of going down the islands from Trinidad, they will say, hey,
all right,
look,
Mr. George,
the island, we're going up to Tobago, and you'll have all that business available.
All right, we have to leave it there. Stay on the line. We go for the news, and when we come back, we continue to talk about the ideas that are on the shelf that needs to be in actuality. So stay there. We'll be right back, Mr. George, with Mr. George after the news. See you then. Welcome back, and of course our guest is online, Mr. Martin George, Chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber. And of course we are talking, all right, so I want us to go to the National Committee for a Roadmap to Recovery nationally, but I just want to finish up with Tobago first. Right, so we need the marina, we need to do that quickly. There are other sectors outside of the tourism, and that would fall under tourism. You spoke about agriculture, or food production, or food reliance, or self-reliance on our food supply. What do we need to do?
Well, in terms of the agriculture, what we need first of all to do is to develop that mindset whereby we think of how do we get our food now, all right? Okay, the reality is, if the boat doesn't come from Trinidad or from the small islands, our markets really have nothing. So therefore, we need to understand that, look, is it that we want to keep it that way, or do we want to develop our own self-sufficiency? If we want to develop self-sufficiency, it cannot be just simply by telling people, go plant a kitchen garden. Because the thing is, the reality is that given our busy lives, seeing about families, seeing about children, work, etc., not everybody has the time or the ability to develop a proper kitchen garden. I mean, you may plant a few things, but that cannot be the idea from a macroeconomic perspective for Tobago. So therefore, this is where, again, as I say, the THA has to come in terms of the facilitative, enabling environment. So therefore, you identify, first of all, the areas of land whereby you say, look, these are suitable for agrarian development, and you say you purchase or you acquire these large tracts of land, and then now you say, okay, let us get persons who are experienced in developing this. Take, for instance, you have, like, for instance, in Trinidad, I could tell you, in Couva, you have Mr. Claude Valentine, who is an internationally renowned breeder of cows, sheep, goats, etc. So you tap into that type of expertise and you say, hey, listen, Mr. Valentine, can we partner with you? Can you help us set up a proper, sheep breeding, cow breeding, goat breeding facility on a mega scale? So you're not talking about, having 2 goats tied in your backyard. That is not, agriculture on a macroeconomic scale.
Right.
That is your little domestic use. The point is, if you want to do this properly, we have to think outside the box, and we have to start thinking in terms of how do we develop things from an international perspective.
All right.
Okay? Even the supply of, say, for instance, milk. You have your cows, therefore you would have the cows that are for milk production, you'll have the cows that are for beef production, and then you now set up your facility whereby you either have the sterilization or the sanitization of your milk that is gotten from the cows, and therefore you develop things. But it has to be done from that macro perspective. It cannot be that you simply say, well, I'm handing out seedlings. Okay, come and take a tray of seedlings. Come on, seriously? In 2020?
Okay, good. All right.
To be our economic agricultural plan for Tobago.
Okay.
Come and take seedlings.
All right, good. So we got the point. So we need to mass produce and to have the designated lands and so on. Brilliant. And I agree with you 100% with that. All right. Let's deal with, of course, we need to be self-sustaining. But just to throw in the mix there, this whole idea of the fishing industry. That's a sleeping giant. There was a conversation at one point about fish farming. Speak to us from that perspective, given our fish stock and our fish in high demand across the world and so on. Talk to us from that standpoint.
Okay, all right. So now, if you're talking fish farm, and I assume you mean on-land development of your fish
on land
farm.
or in the sea. There is also fish farming in the sea as well.
All right, okay, all right. So on land, that's something, of course, yes, we can definitely start looking at in terms of setting those things up. But the thing is, even in terms of our oceans, we need to ensure that we take it from the perspective of not just sending people out in a boat and saying, well, okay, look, go and catch as much as you can. We need to ensure that we are partnering with the IMA, all right, the EMA, and the oceanographic authorities who are now able to say, well, look, we have done a study, we have done some research in your waters of Tobago. You have this type of fish stock, so therefore you need to get more of this type in, because when this type comes in, then many other types will now develop and flourish as a result. So in other words, we need to use the science, brother B. I saw programs where in other parts of the world, in Australia, for instance, they have specific restocking program. So in other words, they go out and they buy the little guppies, the little, small baby fish, and they now restock their oceans, they restock their rivers.
Wow. By
saying, look, we want to develop this type of fish because this small one is what feeds the medium-sized one. The medium-sized one is what feeds the big ones. So once you develop that food chain, then now you will understand that your food supply in terms of your fish is going to increase. We also have to ensure that we patrol our waters because, I mean, we certainly have been giving away all our flying fish. There's a neighboring CARICOM country, which we will not name, but they come, they catch the flying fish, and you see them, they stamp made in Barbados on it and they sell it. We also have to protect it in that way. But what I'm saying is that we have to take the benefit of science, technology when we are approaching these things.
Excellent.
You look at some of the fishing vessels, all right? I mean, the point is most of them appear to be, the young fellas are trying on their own. The vessels appear to be homemade. They don't have a very long range. They can't go out very far. They can't stay out for very long. So therefore, even that you have to look at. In other words, what are we doing? What is our fish processing facility? We're still selling fish out of a bucket or an ice box. Come on, in 2020, seriously?
Excellent.
That can't be what the THA wants for the future of Tobago.
All right, All right. Let's go to the national Road Recovery Committee and your take. Obviously, a team was put in place. Give us your take from the national standpoint.
Right. From the macroeconomic perspective, a lot of the ideas that they put forth seem to, be forward-thinking. The only concern I have, Brother B, is I'm not sure what was the mandate of that commission. In other words, is it that they were to set out a roadmap of what we should do, or what at this point we could do? Because I got the feeling largely that what was set out in their final report appeared to be a very good plan for what we should do. So in other words, ideas such as the electronic ID for all citizens, these are great things, but of course, you're talking that being years down the road. So in terms of their mandate, that's where I was a little bit concerned, because I thought, and I may be entirely wrong in this regard, but I thought that this was arising out of the COVID-19 pandemic, that the government had set up this team to say, well, hey, look, let's find a way out of this present crisis. So while the ideas are, esoteric and lofty and, long-term ideas, I didn't see enough of the short to medium-term ideas that can be quickly implemented to ensure that we come out of this, in a way that the economy survives the bruising that it has taken from COVID-19. So that was one of my concerns, Okay. Of course, that would also mean that you address things possibly from a different perspective, rather than saying that you create basically what is a negative list. Because I saw that as one of the ideas. And I think that in the year 2020 is a particularly backward and archaic and anachronistic idea.
All right.
You create a list of luxury goods and you ban that and say, well, people must not, purchase that. At the end of the day, everybody is on Amazon. Everybody has their credit card. Everybody is, using PayPal or whatever, and they're shopping. So, how do you police that? How do you monitor that? It didn't seem, with the greatest of respect, to be things that can give us that immediate fillip or boost for our economic situation.
All right.
On a whole in Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, Mr. George, first of all, businesses have suffered, are suffering now, and will take time to get back on solid footing, and maybe not in the short distant future, maybe not in quick succession, immediately after COVID. Let's deal with the businesses and how can they better be able to sustain themselves, keep staff, and so on. This whole question of bailout that the team needs to put in place or should put in place to ensure that businesses keep their staff and keep people fed, keep people paying their bills. Do you see that as first priority for any committee in the Road to Recovery?
Well, it has to be something that you consider and you deal with, because the fact is that as a result of this pandemic, not all businesses will survive. That's
the reality. Okay.
We have to understand that. But where I would have preferred to see the government focus more would have been on setting up centers for retraining, retooling, refining, and repurposing workers, if you understand me. So in other words, all right, so I may have been working at a restaurant and, for 5-7 years, and it looks like the restaurant may close down, all right? So that's what I have as my skill. But if I am to get employment otherwise, it may be in another industry. So therefore, that's where I thought the government, could have shown a bit more leadership in terms of you set up these centers. So you say, okay, all right, if it is that all you've been doing is as a waitress and your restaurant is likely to close down, okay, we're going to offer you maybe a 3-month computer course, a free training, whereby you can now be able to at least say, hey, I can probably apply for an admin assistant position somewhere because I've done a computer course, I've done certain training, that kind of thing. So I think we have to look at the retooling aspect for workers. It's not just a question of saying, well, you're handing money to the businesses, because some of the businesses were struggling even before COVID-19. So handing money to them now is you basically just putting money in a bottomless pit. Some of them were not going to survive anyhow. So we have to be careful in terms of how we treat with that. And I think developing the human capital and focusing your money there would be a better investment at the end of the day. So even if it is that maybe you are training persons to become micro entrepreneurs, to learn some sort of skill or something of the sort. There's so many things that we can do as a people. I have said repeatedly, just a simple thing like, for instance, our Bene balls that we feel so proud of. When you look at it, Brother B, we are still doing this in a very crude, old-fashioned way. I have said repeatedly, you set up a Beneball factory.
Yes.
In other words, your balls must be of a nice, round, even, specific size. You package it properly. You have a nice bow over it. You put it in a way that you can now export it. So therefore, when foreigners are leaving, they have this nice, beautiful package with a picture of Tobago on it.
Wow.
I mean,
Let me get in with you there, because I think I've said that already. That and we take for granted Beneballs. We don't have a Beneball farm to speak what you're speaking there, and that needs to be invested in. I totally agree with you. There's also farine, and we're still making farine in the old-fashioned way with a copper, with some and so on. How do we translate that? How do we get the minds or the government or those in power to see that these are industries that can earn? You walk into any candy store in any part of the world, and all the sweets are there. Beneball is candy or is a sweet, and that's how it's going to be referred to internationally. How do we get the business? How do we get them to understand, to buy into that, and be supportive of the ideas that you are putting here?
Well, and you see, this is where leadership comes about, and this is what leadership is. Leadership is not me lording it over you and oppressing you and have you on a string whereby you keep coming to me begging and I am feeling powerful and mighty as a result of that. That's not what leadership is about. Leadership is about empowering and enabling your people so that they can go and develop, and therefore, as a result, everybody develops, and you have now a stronger, more prosperous, and more powerful nation. But the thing is, some of our leaders are so insecure, they are so timid, they are so afraid of their own shadows that they feel that if they empower the people, then the people will no longer need them. And we need to step out of that mindset. We need to understand that, listen, when you look at companies like Google, you look at companies like Amazon, and you understand how they develop. It's by empowering their people. I remember a conversation I had with Mr. Arthur Lockjack some years ago. And, he told me, he said, Martin, most of the companies I own, I know nothing about how to run them or how to do the manufacturing processes. He said, but I hire people who know how to do it, and I empower them and allow them to develop it. And that's what good leadership is about. So we need to understand that. We need to break free of this, very overlording mindset whereby you feel that leadership is domination and control. Come on, we're not back in the dark ages. We're in the year 2020, and Tobagonians need to understand these ideas so that they will demand that our leaders do better for them and provide the enabling environment so that Tobagonians can grow, flourish. And I tell you, I've always said it, Brother B, and I believe it to the fullest. Tobago can be the leader of Tobago and Trinidad. And that's why I always say it that way. I say it in that order. I see us as Tobago and Trinidad.
Excellent. We want to thank you, Mr. George, for giving me the wind up, but indeed, a very, we got so much this morning, and I will hope that the authorities and still are accommodating or will accommodate you should you be available, as you indicated that you're willing to work with this new Chief Secretary. I hope that you get the call when we finish, when we are done here, and you will be part of the process. Yes?
All right, thanks a lot, Brother B. Have a good morning.
All right, good. Of course, Martin George, and chairman of the Tobago Chamber, chairman of the Tobago Chamber. Yeah. All right, with that, we go for a break. When we come back, we continue to take your calls this morning. See you after this break.